So good afternoon to everyone. I have the pleasure to introduce next symposium that is an EAGG ER European Region Symposium. It's an official symposium in which we present the three chairmen of the three section of the International Association of Gerontology and Geriatrics. I present myself. I'm Mario Barbagallo. I'm the president of the European region of EAGG. And now we have three fantastic speakers that are the three chairmen. The first one will be Professor Suresh Rattan from Denmark. He's the chair of the biological section of EAGG ER that will take a lecture on taking status of biogerontology in Europe. The second speaker will be Professor Timo Sandberg from Finland. He's the chair of the clinical section of EAGG ER that will give a lecture on repurposing older cardiovascular drugs for COVID-19 treatment. And then we have Professor Sandra Torres, is the chair of the social behavioral section of EAGG ER that will give a lecture on network and resources for social behavioral research on aging and old age, European investment that extend beyond this continent. As I said before, the first speaker will be Professor Suresh Rattan that will give the lecture on taking status of biogerontology in Europe. Suresh.
Hello, I'm Suresh Rattan. I'm the chairman of the European region of IAGG's biological section, and I will be talking about the status of biogerontology in Europe. In Europe, the biological sciences research has been going on for almost 40 years in a great manner, and it's continuing. Basically, we deal with the four major aspects of aging: evolutionary and demographic aspects, descriptive aspects, mechanistic aspects, and more recently, interventional aspects. So in the evolutionary and demographic aspects, there are many countries involved. And in Denmark, where I am presently based, our Aarhus University and another university, Southern Denmark University, is very well known for that. Recently, actually, we lost a very famous biodemographer from Denmark, Professor Jim Woppel, who recently died. But he has been contributing a lot in the understanding of the evolutionary and demographic aspects of aging. The things which Europe has been famous for studying these aspects has been the trends in changing average lifespans, changing life expectancies, and maximum lifespan records. And there have been two schools: those who think that these maximum lifespans will continue to increase or life expectancies will continue to reach, or the other school which thinks at one stage we will reach a plateau. But Europe has been in the forefront of this kind of research for almost 5 decades. That has also answered a very important question, that when does biological aging begin in our lifetime? Does aging begin from birth or from some other stage in life? And that's where the concept of essential lifespan was developed in Europe, basically from our labs. That essential lifespan is the lifespan needed by the species in natural environment to continue generations, for the reproduction and continuation of generation. That's essential lifespan. So if an organism lives beyond the essential lifespan of an organism, of the species, then aging will start. For Homo sapiens, this essential lifespan then comes out to be around 45 years. Considering this as the definition of aging, then the aging has been described in descriptive terms: what happens during aging at the level of species, at the levels of population, individuals, systems, organs, cells, organelles, moleculars. And this has been a major theme throughout the countries in Europe, and which includes Austria, Denmark, France. As you can see, almost all the countries have been contributing, and there have been many famous people coming out of that, and great contributions made in the description of aging. And what we have learned from those descriptions is that, yes, what happens in individuals, so this from top to bottom description, from individual to systems to basic molecular level to metabolomic level. And this is not a small achievement. The aging has been described tremendously well. And what have we learned from all this description, where Europe has contributed a lot? And that is the mechanistic aspects, how aging happens, why aging happens, are there genes involved in aging, what kind of proteins are involved? And that's again, once again, almost all the countries within Europe have been great contributors to this research. And the common message coming is that there are no gerontogenes. There are no genes which have evolved specifically with the purpose of causing aging. Aging still happens, not because there are genes, but because evolution does not make perfect systems. There are imperfect systems of survival, repair, and maintenance. So occurrence and accumulation of damage at all levels is a central theme in the mechanisms of aging. There can be variations, the tissue-dependent variations, species-dependent variations. But because, as I mentioned, the systems of maintenance and repair are not perfect in evolution, they never are. So they allow the occurrence and accumulation of the damage, which has its major influence manifested during the period of aging, which happens if we live beyond the essential lifespan of our species. So there is a huge amount of data available, what kind of damages are happening at what level. Now, this raises the basic question of how do we then intervene in these processes? Do we go from this reductionistic correlation back in the same way that we are trying to find stimulators, inhibitors, stabilizers, and removers by taking one target at a time? That, okay, if mTOR is the problem, let's do something about it, or glycation. But the problem with biological systems, which we have realized, is it doesn't work like that. It's easy to come from top to bottom, but going from bottom upward, where manipulating one thing like telomere or methylation can show effects at the functional and behavioral and every other aspect of aging, that is the biggest challenge. But this is where most of the research is going on. And we have aging treatment, preventions, and management. Either these are piecemeal remedies that try to correct what is going wrong, that's like organs and stem cells, and most recently the senolytic approaches that get rid of the senescent cells, or cell rejuvenation, which is the latest approach, which is also being followed in Europe, or replenishment. You give hormones, bioextracts, food supplements, cosmetics. All these kind of research is going on in many, many labs within Europe. And the latest approach is the more holistic approach, hormesis, this which we sometimes also call biphasic dose response or U-shaped response, where something which is more toxic at a higher dose is generally health beneficial at a lower dose. And we call this phenomenon as a hormesis, that exposure to low level and repeated stress of choice. In the case of human beings, that becomes a very important word. Stress of choice is going to be health beneficial. And the paradigm of hormesis is physical exercise. Exercise is beneficial because it causes challenge, it causes damage, it produces free radicals, it produces acids, it kills the cells, and then you get benefit. This is the powerful phenomenon of hormesis, which is more a holistic kind of intervention in aging for both the quantitative aspects of age and the qualitative aspects of age. Things which cause hormesis have been termed hormetins, and this is also basically a European contribution to the literature in terminology. Physical hormetins, like I said, exercise, hot temperature, cold temperature, radiation, or mental hormetins, doing brain exercises, or most commonly, these nutritional hormetins. A lot of things we eat in the food, like spices and herbs, they are useful because they are actually toxic. They are toxic at higher doses, but at low doses, they work as hormetins. They induce the damage, and the cells and the body tries to counteract the damage, and you get benefit. Similarly, calorie restriction and intermittent fasting, that is a very popular research area being used throughout the world, and especially in Europe, and we have lots and lots of information around it. So in conclusion, I would just like to give this central message that biological aging research, which is biogerontology, which is also the name of a Springer Nature journal, Biogerontology, being run from Denmark, me being its editor-in-chief. In European countries, this biogerontology is a highly active, innovative, and successful research within the umbrella of IAGG and this European regional section. We also have a book series, Healthy Aging and Longevity, again, published by Springer Nature, where we bring in the latest biogerontological research going on within Europe and beyond Europe. And we have published the Encyclopedia of Biomedical Gerontology. So I am very happy to share this aspect that the biological section of the IAGG's European region is most lively, active, and continues to be highly productive, innovative, and successful. Thank you.
The next speaker is Professor Timo Strandberg from Finland. He's the chair of the clinical section of IAGG-ER, that we present his lecture on repurposing older cardiovascular drugs for COVID-19 treatment. Timo.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. My topic this afternoon is repurposing older cardiovascular drugs for COVID-19 treatment. These are my disclosures. I use many drugs myself, of those I'm presenting. So for the introduction, vaccinations against corona infection are progressing globally in different phases in different countries, but still also drugs are needed for treatment of infection. However, specific antivirals have their limitations. There are some available, but anyway, they are not perfect. Besides infection, also the state of the host is important for the outcome in COVID-19. Because patients with cardiovascular diseases are at special risk group and endothelial dysfunction is important for COVID-19 complications, existing cardiovascular drugs may be useful, even without specific action on the virus. And I'm now in my presentation referring to a recent article made by a European group, European Geriatric Medicine Society interest group, published last autumn about this topic. Okay, COVID-19 corona infection is also a microvascular disease, and that's very important reason for complications during corona infection. You can see here the endothelial cell and coronavirus, and endothelial cell, of course, they are very, very important in blood vessel function. And you can see on the left side, normal endothelial and its functions, and on the right side, the various effects corona infection can have on various endothelial functions, and also in many organs from brain, heart, lungs, and so on, kidneys and so on. And also, besides this endothelitis, cytokine storm can be a very important pathogenetic factor, and also thrombosis, of course, leads to various complications, and they are frequently seen in severe corona infection patients. And then we have these existing cardiovascular drugs, and they have many actions for these different pathogenetic factors, from statins, from ACE inhibitors, anticoagulants, antiplatelet agents like aspirin. They have effects on the endothelium. Here is the list of potential drugs I'm presenting in this in my lecture. First, I'll talk about drugs affecting the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, like ACE inhibitors and ATR blockers. Then statins, aspirin, anticoagulants, and finally some words about colchicine. So first, ACE inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers. You may remember that initially in 2020, there were concerns of the effects of these drugs because it was known that coronavirus uses ACE2 as its receptor to enter the cell, and these drugs have effects on these receptors. Okay, these concerns were unfounded. This has been shown several times during the 2.5 years. These drugs are safe. And on the contrary, these drugs may even be protective. And there are some studies that especially in combination with statins, there might be protection. Then statins, they are very important cardiovascular drugs, of course, used by millions of people, and they are established drugs to improve prognosis in patients with cardiovascular disease. This is evidence-based several times. But also, several observational studies to date have reported better prognosis also in patients with COVID-19 if they are using statins. And actually, there have been quite recent meta-analysis of this topic. This is one of them, of 25 observational studies, and it was this analysis was published last autumn. Over 140,000 patients with COVID-19, and among them, statins or statin use was independently associated with a significant reduction in mortality. And moreover, subgroup analysis showed that only chronic use of statins significantly reduced mortality according to the adjusted models. But of course, many investigators say that we need randomized trials to finally prove this, and some of them are ongoing. But anyway, I think there are no other drug where we have this kind of observational study evidence in COVID-19. Then, of course, aspirin and antiplatelets, they are established drugs in secondary prevention of cardiovascular disease. But thus far, there's no solid evidence that aspirin and drugs like that would improve prognosis in COVID-19. But of course, the data are not very big. Then anticoagulants. They are established drugs for prevention for thromboembolic complications. And these complications, of course, are frequent in COVID-19. Studies so far suggest that anticoagulants in therapeutic doses may seem beneficial in hospitalized patients with COVID-19. Well, switching existing oral anticoagulants to parenteral heparin, that's an open question. But anyway, as a conclusion, optimal antithrombotic therapy in COVID-19 is yet to be determined, and the data is insufficient for general recommendations. And finally, of these drug classes, colchicine, heard a few words about that. It's of course an ancient anti-inflammatory drug, especially used in gout. During the last few years, there have been very intriguing results in 2 big trials, which showed benefit in secondary prevention of coronary artery disease in patients already treated with statins. And of course, that raised interest whether this drug also could have benefit in COVID-19. And there was this randomized large CORONA trial, which showed evidence of benefit in COVID-19 patients, as 2 deaths and hospital admissions. But anyway, totality of evidence, I think, is still insufficient for recommendations in the treatment of COVID-19 with colchicine. So, dear colleagues, conclusions. Most current cardiovascular drugs can be safely continued during COVID-19. I think this is a very safe conclusion and a secure conclusion. But in addition to that, some drug classes, especially statins, may even be protective during COVID-19. But of course, we need more studies about this topic. So, thank you very much, and my warm greetings from Finnish summer and midnight sun. Thank you.
Thanks. The next speaker is Professor Sandra Torres from Sweden. This is the chair of the Social Behavioral section of IAGG ER that will give the lecture on networks and resources for social behavioral research on aging and old age, European investment that extend beyond this continent. Sandra.
Good afternoon, good evening. I have been recording a couple of these sessions and I've started the same way because we have no idea when you will be joining us to look at these recordings. It is a pleasure to address you today. I am doing so this time as president of the Socio-Behavioral section of IAGG ER. If you're new to the IAGG circle, that means the International Association of Gerontology and Geriatrics European region. Today, I'm going to be addressing you on networks and resources for socio-behavioral research in aging and old age. Our symposium combines the different sections for IAGG ER, and I thought it would be useful not only for Europeans attending the meeting, but also from people outside of our continent to get a sense of the European investments that they can actually reach through what is known as cost actions. So that's why you see at the very bottom of my screen here, the cost logo. Now, the rationale for today's presentation is the following. I'm a sociologist, so let me put that out there from the beginning, which means that I'm very well aware that the conditions under which we conduct research on aging and old age around the globe are very different. And those conditions create inequalities as far as research infrastructure are concerned, but also as far as our respective abilities to conduct and disseminate research. In some parts of the world, the funding for the research we conduct comes primarily from local, regional, or national funders, if we're lucky enough to secure a grant. In other parts of the world, we're fortunate enough to have those levels of funding, as well as levels of funding of research infrastructure that stretch across the continent. In the case of Europe, for example, EU has funding available to us working in European countries, as long as we conduct research that is comparative in nature. Now, the other reason why I'm addressing you on this is that as chair of IAGG ER's social behavioral section, I feel that it's my moral obligation to offer colleagues in Europe, as well as beyond, insight into the kind of networks and resources that are available for those of us doing this type of research. Because some of this funding actually transcends geographical distance, but not a lot of people seem to know that they're out there and that it can access those resources. So the presentation has been designed to hopefully give you an idea of what the cost action networks are about and how they could potentially help you build your own career and also expand your networks. So what is cost then? COST is the abbreviation for European Cooperation in Science and Technology. I'm not paid by COST, people, but I happen to have enjoyed quite a sizable number of networks opportunities through the funding that they offer. This is a funding program that encourages networking of scientific and technological research activities throughout Europe and beyond. Now, COST follows 3 strategic priorities. COST tries to promote and spread excellence in research and innovation. They're trying to foster interdisciplinary research specifically with the idea that it could lead to breakthrough science. And it is trying to empower and retain young research and innovators. So it is people in the beginning of their career, which COST considers to be doctoral students and up to 7 years after they defended the dissertation, to be the emerging scholars that they spend so much time, effort, and resources on. COST is mainly funded through European framework programs, such as Horizon 2020 or Horizon Europe, to give you an example. So COST invests in something called cost actions, which is a fancy word of saying network pretty much. And these cost actions aim to strengthen Europeans' capacity to address scientific, technological, as well as societal challenges. A cost action is an interdisciplinary research network that brings both researchers and innovators together to investigate a topic of their choice for 4 years. So basically, there are networks made up of researchers from academia, from SMEs, from public institutions, and other relevant organizations or interested parties. So in the area of aging and old age, for example, we tend to work with stakeholders. So it could be local, regional, or national actors in, for example, just to give you an example, elder care as a sector. So these networks or cost actions offer a pan-European environment for individuals of all levels of seniority to grow their professional research networks and to boost their careers. That's the main aim of COST. These networks are open to all COST members. There's 40 of them at present, all of them based in Europe. They have, however, a cooperating member in Israel, as well as a partner in South Africa. And they also have bilateral opportunities offered to non-COST countries through what they call the COST Global Networking. So for example, in North America, EU Access is the portal for global networking into COST actions, and in Latin America, it's EU Access. Don't know if you've heard about them, but they may be worth a doodle or Google, mixing up those two. Anyway, COST programs do not fund research as such. What they provide is funding for networking activities of various kinds, but it is in the purpose of conducting research or setting up for research. Now, participants in a COST action collaborate through a range of called networking tools, such as meetings. There's funding for people to meet one another through COST actions, and they are grouped into working groups. That's the name they're used in COST language. Conferences are also offered, including stakeholders, so not only the members of these COST actions. There's short-term missions that are also funded through COST. And what that means that you can apply through a COST action and their funding in order to go somewhere for, say, anything from a couple of weeks to a couple of months in order to complete a small concrete project. It could be anything like co-authoring a paper together with somebody in another part of the world, or it could be harmonizing a data set, or maybe even engaging in analysis for data sets that were not collected necessarily for the purpose of being compared, but that you're trying to explore the idea of comparing them because you happen to understood that somebody else somewhere else in another country happens to have been done research that resembles what you've done before. There's training schools being offered by all COST actions. Every COST action must plan at least one training course, a training school a year. These are open to doctoral students and emerging scholars. So they're building capacity through these networks. Virtual networking grants are also available through COST. And then there's the publications that COST actions put together. It could be policy briefs and it could be synthesis papers, not just peer review papers, not just book chapters and books. The policy briefs and synthesis papers are always available free of charge through these actions' own websites. Now, the actions last for 4 years and each receive funding of around 130,000 euros per year for these activities. And usually, typically, an action includes around 28 full or cooperating members of the COST action. And what I mean by that, those are the members of the action. These are the people that are in fact working towards reaching the goals of the action. But the training schools, the conferences are available to all. You just need to alert and follow their cycles. So how do you become involved? Potentially could be your next question, or what else do you need to know? One thing that I would like you to keep in mind is that these actions act as a pre-portal to other funding or instruments in Europe. So the follow-up proposals from COST Action have a 37% success rate, which leads to about 5.8 million euros spin-off funding per action. What that means, my friends, is that although these are not EU-funded projects for research, These gives you an idea of what it is people around Europe are investing on in terms of topics. Now, because of the openness of cost, these actions, which run for 4 years, you can join them and participate in the events at any given time. So you need not necessarily be a full member. You need not have joined from the very beginning in order to take part in the activities. Now, depending on the country you're based and the bilateral cooperation, you may have different kinds of rights and access to these different actions, activities, but they are there and they're available and offer far more than some of us seem to be aware of. So if you're looking for a research partner in Europe, and or if you happen to be an emerging scholar in the beginning of your career according to cost standards and want to take part in the training schools who are free of charge, you want to keep an eye on cost actions. They bring together a large number of European researchers in our field over 4-year cycles, as I said, and often these researchers during those 4 years collaborate to put together proposals that then apply for research funding. So for example, I was involved in one of those actions a couple of years ago. It ended in 2021. And that action ended up leading to another project now with 5 countries. So if you look into what cost actions are being funded at any time, you get a very good sense of where they are network hungry people in Europe because they have specific goals in mind for these actions. Now, from 2018, already completed, however, are these 3 actions that happen to do with aging and old age specifically and sociobehavioral sciences. I'm not listing all of the cost actions that have to do with the clinical sciences or health sciences, biology, or anything else like my colleagues in IAGG are presenting today. But these 3 have recently finished and have produced an array of resources, such as synthesis papers, policy briefs, as well as a network where you can access people that are invested in these topics. It's ageism, family solidarity, and old age exclusion were the 3 from over the past years that have just been completed. Now, these are the ones that just received funding. There's 4 of them in aging and old age that have implications of behavioral sciences. It's Smart Habitat for the Elderly, the Network for Research in Vascular Aging that has a sociobehavioral component, National Interdisciplinary Network on Smart Healthy Age-Friendly Environments, and the Network on Evidence-Based Physical Activity in Old Age. Besides these, there's also other cost actions at once, and some of them have been funded now, that have implications for aging. They may have a working group on aging, even though they're not necessarily focused solely on aging. There's around 60 cost actions ending every year through these kinds of funding. So there's quite a lot out there when it comes to research networks in this part of the world. And as I said, through various activities accessible to all. So if you want to become involved, like I said, I don't work for cost. I just know that they do wonderful things, especially for emerging scholars. Then you can submit an application, of course, yourself, if you happen to be one of the 40 members. This requires a joint effort of at least 7 different cost members or cooperating states, at least 7 members, but remember the average cost action includes around 28. So it's really, really large networks. Usually about half of them need to be what they call inclusiveness targets or ITC countries. These change different years depending on the EU's own political ambitions. The next deadline for cost action applications is in October 20, 2022. You can check out the list for ongoing cost actions in the COST website, and I'm giving it here today, www.cost.eu. There's a database of all cost actions that offer you a short description of them, a list of the members in the management team, and a memorandum of understanding, which basically means a proposal for the action. So you get a good sense of what are the goals for each action, which kind of working groups are working within the realm of an action, and so on and so forth. All the activities are posted through the specific action websites, not through the COST website. So the COST website just gives you an orientation, what's out there, and then you click on each specific action's own website. Now, once you have identified a cost action that you would like to join, and as I mentioned, you can join for different as either a member or a participant. of different activities, you can do one of the following alternatives. You can send an expression of interest via the COST website for the actual action you would like to join, which means that the COST people know that you have expressed interest. And you can also contact working group members. You can also contact the chair, but that will be a very busy bee for the 4 years that the action is working. So I would rather you contact a working group member and also a working group leader. You could also contact the country partners if you happen to be in one of the 40 countries of the COST, or the collaborating partner, that is Israel, or the partner member, which is Israel, South Africa, sorry. In these countries, there's something called a COST national coordinator. And these people can tell you, it's usually a national funder with that specific responsibility, which COST actions do they have for representation from your own country in a COST action at any given time, and do they need representation? Sometimes a COST action starts, and although there's spaces reserved, a certain number of them per country, they don't get filled up. So do give your COST national coordinator a call if you happen to be in a country where you have such a coordinator. And if not, just check the website, see what these actions are about, see if there's anything out there that you can join, potentially one of the conferences if you cannot join as a member, or one of the training schools. This is all I had for today, my friends. Thank you for your attention. Hope the presentation was useful. If you have any kind of concern or want to pick my brains about COST actions, as I mentioned, I was heavily involved in RoseNet. You can give me a call. And if not, join us for the Q&A session after this particular symposium. Thank you for today.
You please start.
Good afternoon to everyone. So I have just to thank all the free speakers, with three fantastic speakers, the free chairman of the free section of the International Association of Gerontology and Geriatrics European region, Professor Suresh Rattan.
Yeah,
Professor Suresh
okay,
Rattan is the president of the biological section. Professor Timo Stander is president of the clinical section, and Professor Sandra Torres is the president of the social behavioral section. We have three fantastic lectures. I just want to remind that our next Congress of the European region will be in Malaga on 26th, 28th of June of 2028. I want to invite everyone to participate at this next European Congress. I don't think there is any question from the auditorium. This Professor Suresh Rattan is asking to.
No, I just wanted to bring in some discussion parts, especially with the sociology section, because we all know aging is very complex, and it's not, biology does not explain everything, and sociology doesn't explain everything. But Sandra, can you see some ways of we three sections collaborating more actively, European level or global level, where we can learn from each other and teach each other? Do you think there is anything good about it? Not just saying, yes, all collaborations are good, but what is the good and bad if we try to combine biology with sociology, and sociology with clinical?
So the presentation that I made was about the resources offered by the EU to something called COST actions. COST actions are networks that bring together people who are working on an area. They need not necessarily be about aging, but there's a sizable number of COST actions about aging. At the moment, there's 4 that are just running. One is actually on vascular disease. Just to give you an example, which I presented in my presentation that just finished. So in those COST actions, usually there are scholars from all spheres, all disciplines that come together to actually work on a common goal. But these are not research projects. They are research networks. And what that means is that they're synthesizing knowledge in order to identify not only knowledge gaps, but also the way forward. So to give you an example, I was involved in a COST action on reducing old age exclusion. And one of the things that we did in there was, among other things, to team up with people working in biogerontology in your field to create a model of how to think about social exclusion that went beyond what we were focusing on, which is, as social scientists, the spheres of social exclusion from amenities, social inclusion for transportation, social exclusion when it comes to services, social inclusion in neighborhoods, and so on and so forth. So one of the researchers there, for example, brought into the cross-action biogerontologists at one point in time. So as I see it, one of the greatest ways through which you can establish more collaboration across disciplines in the field of aging is through cross-actions, because cross-actions are not determined to be disciplinary. They're actually encouraging multidisciplinary aspects. But that means also that we need to team up with one another from the very beginning in order to write those applications so that they do, in fact, are cross-disciplinary from the very beginning. Now, if you look at the cross-actions that are being funded at the moment, and I will just read and look at my slides as I am speaking to you right now, there are a couple of them running at this very moment that just started a couple of years ago, this past year. So you have one called Smart Habitat for the Elderly. You have one called the Network for Research in Vascular Aging. You have one called the International Interdisciplinary Network on Smart, Healthy, Age-Friendly Environments. And you have a network on evidence-based physical activity in old age. The actual websites for each of those actions are in the presentation I just made. And if you go into those websites, they're fairly new, so they're recently established, but you can see in the short description of them that they are, in fact, multidisciplinary from the very beginning. So they were designed as a multidisciplinary effort. Because the problem sometimes is that, at least in some parts of the European continent, it is encouraged that you work mostly disciplinary or with adjacent disciplines. So the calls are not multidisciplinary enough sometimes, and that creates a problem, either because they're not a call in that matter, or because the people evaluating the call do not have the breadth of interdisciplinary knowledge that would be necessary to actually evaluate the call in a fair enough fashion. So I think the infrastructure that we have in place for funding, it's one of the problems that we face when trying to reach out about disciplines. And that's why I decided to make the presentation I made within the context of this conference about cross actions, because they're the best platform in Europe right now, funding interdisciplinary collaborations for 4 years at a time with training schools and an array of other tools. And it is fostering and emerging capacities in aging that from the very beginning are being trained to work interdisciplinary. I hope I answer your question, Suresh. And I hope I managed to get people to start thinking about cross actions as a way of establishing which kinds of networks can potentially help you wherever you are in the world, but also what is preoccupying the imagination of aging scholars in our continent and beyond.
Thanks very much, Sandra. So, since there are questions from the auditorium, I just want to ask something to Professor Rattan and also to Professor Sandberg. Suresh, you actually mentioned that at the moment they are not identified as gerontogenes.
Yes.
However, we know that the goal is to have to prolong life as much as we can. Of course, hormesis it's a wonderful tool that can allow us to prolong life in some way. But the first question is, do you think that there are no gerontogenes, or they are just not been identified yet, and maybe they will be in the future? And how long can we prolong life? And the second question I will ask to Timo, what you clinically can do to prolong life and then have a healthy and long life?
Yeah. Very important issues you have raised, Mario. Nothing in biology works without genes. So when we say there are no gerontogenes, that basically means there are no genes evolved with a purpose to cause aging and death. Genes are there for survival, for maintenance, for repair, but they are not perfect. So, but if we are looking for a gene which causes aging, no gene causes aging.
Do you think there are genes to cause cancer? There are no cancer-causing genes. Cancer happens when normal genes go crazy. They have a mutation, they lose function, or they gain a new function. Yeah, it's the same thing. Evolution has not evolved oncogenes, but oncogenes are there virtually because normal genes do not behave properly for whatever reasons due to accumulation of damage. Same story is about aging. There are no genes for aging. There are genes for life. And we need to find which genes give more problem at what stage and can we improve upon them and what will be the trade-off thing. So we can definitely play around with the genes if we know how to make a better gene than a normal gene. So maybe Timo wants to take the second part of the story.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very, very good. Thanks, Suresh, and thank you, Mario, and all. I think there are two things in longevity and sort of increasing lifespan. First, are we talking about increasing the species-specific lifespan, which for humans is the record is 122 so far. And I think that's a tough question, and to increase that from beyond that, and I think it has something to do with the geroscience and finding the ways to sort of instruments to go to the aging process as such. But I think more important for clinicians is to sort of maximize the lifespan of humans up to the optimal range, and I think that's possible. And we are talking about the compression of morbidity and how to live not only the length but also the quality. And I think that's more important for me. And then I think we have exercise, we have lifestyle interventions, we have drugs for hypercholesterolemia and hypertension, so that people are not dying prematurely. So I think that's the most important, to maximize the lifespan of humans in that range. And I leave that increasing beyond that to sort of aging researchers, and it's going to be quite tough. And maybe it can be possible, of course, but it's another issue, I think. Yeah.
Maybe I can add a little comment on that in addition to Timo, that yes, we need drugs, but we need drugs for health. How to maintain health, how to recover health, how to enhance health. Yeah. The drugs against diseases, they are also needed when the disease is there. But drugs against aging, that is a totally wrong approach. Drugs for health, usually drugs are against it. That is where, like, exercise is a drug for health. It does not treat a disease. It improves the health mechanisms, and some diseases might get either controlled or better managed. So our approach in aging intervention has to be from anti-aging. Get rid of that word. I hate the word anti-aging. We maintain and improve health. It will also give some dividend on lifespan and health span. So we should not worry about how long we want to live. Theoretically, yes, we should live forever. Why not? But by maintaining health.
Yes, of course, the Earth could, it's not sustainable that everyone would.
We can, at least we can. Ideals, we have to set ideals. But ideals are never supposed to be reached, because otherwise they are not ideals. If they okay,
I agree.
Sorry, Mario.
We must maximize health. We must maximize health span and not lifespan.
Exactly. I fully agree.
Thanks, Suresh. Thanks, Timo. Thanks, Sander. We had a wonderful section. I want again to thank the three speakers. They are the three chairmen, the three section of EAGG-ER. I just want to give you appointment to conclude the section to the next EAGG-ER Congress in Malaga in 26 to 28th of June in 2024, and there may be some other appointment in 2023. Please just check our EAGGER website to get updated to all the news of EAGGER. Also, there is a new news from the social behavioral section from Professor Saunders and many other news. So thanks again to everyone, and have a nice Congress.
Okay.
Okay, and good night from Finland.
Good night.
Bye-bye.